The HomeTech podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support.
This is the HomeTech podcast for Friday, October 9th from Denver, Colorado. I'm Jason Griffin.
And from Sarasota, Florida, I'm Seth Johnson. Jason, what's going on?
I'm living the dream here, Seth. I can't complain. Fall is in the air. We got a great show this week. Everything's good.
Yeah.
How about you?
So far, so good. It's still summer here. There's no fall in the air. There's a hurricane out in the Gulf of Mexico that's going to pound Louisiana again. So, sorry for you guys over there.
Awful.
Yeah. But that said, hopefully coming to the end of our crazy storm season and into the nice weather world of what we call winter, which is basically a high of, 79, 70, 75, somewhere in there. In the lows, down in the 50s, I guess.
Coming out of storm season into a nice, calm, soothing election season.
Oh, right. Oh, that reminds me. The adults are talking tonight. So I can't wait to tune into that.
Yeah, no doubt. Anyways, like I said, we got a great show here this week. Was really excited. We had Justin Worley on. He's the owner of Audio Concepts and Desert Valley Audio Video. So he owns two different integration companies, Desert Valley being in Arizona and Audio Concepts being a newer company to him anyways. It's a company that's been around for a while. He purchased it recently and was really fun to talk to Justin. I've been wanting to get more integrators on the show. We've had tons of guests over the years, but mostly from the vendor side and the manufacturing side of the industry. And so it was great to chat with Justin and learn a lot about the ways that he's grown and by all accounts been very successful in the industry of building his business and not getting trapped in that cycle that I think so many people in the industry do of constantly working in the business instead of being able to sort of step back and grow and scale companies in this industry. That's not an easy thing to do. So really, really enjoyed learning more about his approach.
Yeah, it was a good chat. One that we don't have too often on here. So can't wait to play that for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So be sure to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, Seth, before we jump into some HomeTech headlines, I've got a hot new fashion tip for you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Slack shoes.
Slack shoes. Okay. Explain.
Well, I have to explain. I mean, when I think instant messaging platform, I definitely think sneakers.
Yeah.
You don't? You don't? That's interesting.
No, I don't. I see these. And you sent these over earlier, and I can't figure out what, like, do they tap you, or do they make a little Slack sound when you get a notification, or do they turn colors, or are they just in the Slack colors?
That's what I was wondering. I was like, is there some sort of at least tie-in to these that make them?
Doesn't look like it.
Sort of like, I don't know, some relevant, I guess. But no, they appear to just be Cole Haan shoes. I mean, they're not bad looking sneakers, I guess. They're not really my style, but like, they don't look bad. But they just kind of slapped a Slack logo on there, and there you have it. I guess mission accomplished. It got people talking. That's for sure.
Right. Maybe we should have some HomeTech shoes, because
there you go.
When I think of home technology, I think of tennis shoes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love where your head's at.
See what we can do. So for me, they would just be flip flops. I don't know about you.
That's perfect. Right up my alley. You got it.
All right, what do you say we jump into some HomeTech headlines?
Let's do it.
Well, Jason, the numbers are in for the first ever CEDIA Expo Virtual, and the numbers are notable. The online experience drew, they're missing a zero, 7,600 trade professionals who made a startling 161,000 visits to 110 virtual exhibitors. Meanwhile, there were 14,000 visits to the 80 CE Pro education courses, which is awesome, and 18 Tech Talk panel discussions and 4 keynotes over the 3 days. So yeah, I mean, when we talk CEDIA, we talk in the 20-ish thousand range.
Yeah.
This is not that.
No, it is not. It is not. I went back and looked. CEDIA 2019 said nearly 20,500 exhibitors. So notable numbers, I guess, but not notable, meaning comparable with the in-person events. 161,000 visits. I mean, there's no way to quantify what that would translate to in the in-person event, right? Like how many booths did individual people walk up to?
Right.
So I don't really know what to make of that number, but I think the biggest one for me is 110 virtual exhibitors versus 500 at the in-person event.
Yeah.
So you've got about a third of the attendees and about 1/5 of the exhibitors at this virtual event.
Well, by that metric, it's not so bad, right? But I don't know. 2020 is just going to be we're just going to chalk that to an off year. Like it's forgivable. So
yeah, no doubt. A couple other interesting numbers here, though. One that jumped out at me: 49% of registrants had not attended CEDIA Expo in the past 3 years. So it does appear to have attracted some people who didn't go when it required travel. Is what I took away from that. Like they did get some new eyeballs there. So I suppose that's a good thing. But yeah, generally a lot lower. Not shocked at that, and I'm sure that Emerald and everybody else in the event industry is ready for a vaccine and ready to get back to in-person events.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, me too.
Moving on from there, Bloomberg reported late this Monday of this week that Apple is dropping Sonos and other non-Apple branded products from their stores. The news of Sonos losing such a major customer caused their stock to derail, and after hours trading down almost 7% in value at one point. On Tuesday, the price closed down 3.2% as Wall Street digested the news.
Not just Bloomberg. This was Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg. So noted Apple. I don't know what were they, rumor monger. I don't know, but he's the one that gets all the tips and figures things out pretty early.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is wild. We know that there's an Apple event coming up just next week on October 13th. That was announced this week. So should we take bets on, are we going to see a HomePod mini?
I'm going with no.
No HomePod mini?
No.
I'm going to go with yes. I'm all in. There's my little HomePod's right here. It doesn't work very well. It's on my desk, but
all right. So you're taking you're going long on that bet, huh? I don't know. The story does say that, according to Bloomberg anyways, that Apple is about to launch an expanded line of Apple and Beats branded audio products. So I may be wrong. On this, but I also wouldn't be surprised if this was more something under the Beats brand, maybe. I'm not sure. They did pull a bunch of headphones out of their stores as well. So maybe that's what the Beats thing is. I don't know. You may be right on this one, Seth, but I'm taking no. Sticking to my guns.
One thing they can't replace very well from Sonos is the home theater space. So Sonos has those the play bars, and I can't forget the other one that came out.
Right.
They won't be able to replace that so easily unless they can. I mean, you would think $1 trillion company can just do anything they wanted, but Apple seems to be, I don't know, more reserved in what they put together. So I don't know. Sorry, I misspoke, Jason. $2 trillion company now. I guess it's up another trillion.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. Like it would be nice to, I don't know, see an Apple line of home theater system. But right now, like if I connect these HomePods up to my Apple TV, they work ish.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're cranky. Sometimes they don't. But when they work, it's really nice. So if they can figure out the home theater thing, that'd be great.
Cranky. We all love cranky technology.
Yeah, this is not a good Apple product.
Yeah.
Just going to put that out there.
Just go on record with that one.
After several years of waiting, it appears that Disney and Apple have reached a deal to make 4K versions of Disney films available through iTunes. A wide selection of Disney movies is now showing as 4K in the iTunes store, with additional support for Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. This is exciting. I can finally watch Frozen in 4K, I guess.
There you go.
That's all we ever watch.
Finally. I don't remember exactly how long ago it was, but there was a story we talked about where 4K little logos were popping up on some of these movies, but then they went away. these companies were still sort of duking it out, I guess. And so good news for users here. It says users have been able to access 4K HDR versions of Disney and Marvel films on Apple TV through Vudu since 2018. So if you're a Vudu subscriber, you've had this ability. But from the iTunes store, this is an update. So good news. Go watch Trolls and wait, Trolls? Is Trolls Disney?
Nope. Yeah, it's Universal.
No, Trolls is not. So you'll have to find that one elsewhere. But Frozen.
We call Trolls New Poppy in my house. You have to understand that it's New Poppy, not Old Poppy.
I love it. Why wouldn't you call it that?
I honestly, it's easier to say than World Tour because I have a hard time with that one. So I can't imagine a 3-year-old can say it. So
no doubt. All right. Well, as we round out our news section this week, Seth, a really busy day coming up. October 13th. Mark that one on your calendar. That is, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, that's going to be next Tuesday, October 13th. We've got quite the stacked lineup. We've got an Apple event. We've got the Snap AV Pro Live event. And Seth, here's the big one. Prime Day.
Ooh,
Amazon garage sale baby.
Yeah. I'm excited about 2 out of 3 of these. So Apple event is, I don't have the time in front of me, but usually that's at 1 p.m. the true time zone. I think 10 a.m. is usually when they kick those off. And they last for about 2 hours. But then Snap AV has a keynote starting up at 2:00. So probably won't be able to tune into the keynote until 3, unless I do both of them at the same time and, double my productivity and not doing my work and watching live streams.
Right.
So could be an interesting day.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try and clear my calendar. I think I'm going to, if I have to pick, I'm going Snap AV Pro. The Apple stuff will be, easy to find all sorts of analysis on that, but obviously Snap AV Pro, a little bit more of a niche industry here, and I feel like that's one that would just be good to watch live. Not only because I'm just curious what Snap is going to show, but we've had a lot of conversations about these virtual events and what companies can do to make them more engaging. And if anyone in the industry has the resources to pull off something, it would be a company like Snap. So yeah. Part of me is just curious how they're gonna structure the event.
And it's not even one day. Like Snap Pro Live goes through the 50. It's a 3-day event. So there's going to be things starting on the 13th at 2 p.m. running till 6 p.m. But then also, and cool, they're doing in office hours. That I'm excited about. That'll be cool for them to sit down and do office hours, 5 to 6 p.m. Just Snap AV product team, ask the expert. So you get in there, you just have a question. Somebody is probably smart enough to answer that question that, directly works on the product. So that'll be cool. And then, starting up the 14th, 10 a.m. Industry Pro panel running through the day, through the office hours again. And then the 15th kind of does just about the same thing with Pro panel and some training as well. So it should be a really cool event. I am going to follow this one closely because I think this is what our training / industry events should look like. I think you're going to see more of this and less of the big CEDIA show type things in the future. This looks like the future to me. And they did I like the colors they chose here. It's fun.
You like that, huh?
I do. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, all the links and topics that we've discussed on our show this week can be found in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/322. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter. We'll send you show reminders and other occasional updates about all the great stuff going on here in the world of home tech. Once again, that link is HomeTech.fm/322.
And don't forget, you can join us in the chat room live Wednesday, starting sometime between 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You can find out more about how to do that at HomeTech.fm/live.
Absolutely. All right, Seth. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight into our interview. Once again, we had Justin Worley on, integrator at Audio Concepts and Desert Valley Audio Video, the owner of both of those companies. And we hope you enjoy the conversation. Hey, Justin, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Definitely, we've been looking forward to getting more guests from the integration side of the business onto the show, and so we're excited to jump into the conversation with you and learn a lot about how you've grown and scaled your business and some of the lessons you've learned along the way. It's a lot of fun. Seth and I both, as former integrators and longtime folks in the industry, again, are excited to jump in. But before we do that, we always like to start with a little bit of personal introduction and background. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Justin Worley. I'm actually live out here in Long Beach, California, and also in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I kind of travel back and forth between those two locations. I have an audio video, actually what I call it is home technology company in Scottsdale named Desert Valley Audio Video. And I have a home technology company that I just purchased about a year and a half ago out here in California with the name Audio Concepts out here in Long Beach.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about your companies. You mentioned the locations, but give us a little bit of context about the size of the companies and kind of the core areas that you guys specialize in.
Sure. The company in Scottsdale, I actually started kind of from scratch in 2011, and we scaled from basically just myself to we were up a little bit over 30 employees right before the COVID hit. And now we're just a little bit below 30 employees out there. We do everything from lighting design, obviously audio, video, and control systems, home automation systems, home audio distribution, Wi-Fi networks, all the way to doing the actual contracted electrical work in homes too, which is kind of a new division for about a year and a half for us. Our company in California that we purchased has been around since 1975. Steve Working is the previous owner that I purchased the company from, and he sold the company to me because he's basically retiring since he did open it back in 1975, and started out kind of more of a retail hi-fi shop. And over the last 4 or 5 years, he's evolved into, as a lot of the hi-fi and retail shops have done, into a little bit more of the custom channel. So he was already doing a little bit of custom, and then I was able to come in and kind of revamp the showroom, make it a full custom outfit, and turn it into kind of the same thing we're doing in Arizona, but minus the electrical at this point.
Sure. Thanks for that context. And I do want to jump in. You touched on a couple of things there that we're going to explore, namely acquiring the second business and some of your decisions there, as well as getting into the electrical work. But I want to go back and start at the beginning and talk about some of your lessons along the way of growing and scaling Desert Valley Audio Video. You're up right around that 30-person mark, which is big in our industry. There's not a ton of companies that get up to that size. And so talk about some of the challenges of growing your business to that size and share some of your perspectives as well that you've shared with me about the whole revenue versus profitability mix.
Well, the first thing to say, anytime I imagine in just about any industry that you're going to be growing a company, it's number one, it's all about the people. First lesson we learned was you can't grow any faster than you can find quality people. And sometimes you might find a quality person that's already trained in the industry. Sometimes you might find a quality person that you can train, but really it's kind of about what's inside the person, what makes them tick, their level of morale and morals. And, just kind of you build around that team, the core team, and then you add people that complement that. And it took a while to do that. There was, points when you're growing so fast that you'll just basically hire anybody that walks in the door. And we had to learn that lesson probably about 10 times before we finally said, we really do need another guy, but let's wait. It's just going to hurt us, in the long run.
I feel like I never learned that lesson.
So, and we still are sometimes. We're just trying to scale up again right now. And, it's painful sometimes when, we're booked out now through almost the end of the year. And, there's jobs that we have to turn away sometimes. And if we just hired somebody, but, you get a good culture, you get a good morale going, and you don't want to mess that up. And I've seen one person, kind of maybe a negative Nancy type person really do a number for everybody's attitude. And so we don't want go down that route. So yeah, it's kind of a challenge there. The other thing that you mentioned was kind of revenue versus profit, and I've seen just many different steps. I think as we've grown from 3 people to 8, then 8 people to maybe 14, and then 14 to 20 something. You kind of see these steps where maybe you're doing more revenue, but you're doing a whole lot less profit because you got to a next level and you're not organized yet. You haven't got your act together, and then you start to get organized, and now you're doing better, and then you grow again. And there's a lot of these steps that you kind of want to make sure you have in place before you try growing too fast. And right now we're a little below 30 employees, and somewhere in that I think 22 to 28 employees in our industry is a really nice area where you can provide a very high quality service to your client. You're not subcontracting stuff out. You're able to have hands on, and you're able to have a little control over the end result. But you're not so big that things are getting missed left and right. And we're still cleaning up a little bit of that at that size.
Right. I imagine that there's a lot of what's the best way? Herding cats, I guess, is probably that goes on at a company of that size. I can only imagine. We topped out around like 6 or 7, and even then it was definitely a challenge. If I can only imagine, with scale comes more of that fun of just running things down and just management in general. That's the whole idea.
Yeah,
I do kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
When you said herding cats, I've got a weird analogy, but I've used it a bunch. Is like when you go bowling and sometimes they've got those bumpers that are in the gutters. I just look at sometimes the manager's role starts to be like that bumper, just like the guys start to get a little go in a different direction than you want. You just got to get them back into the right lane. So
it's a pretty good visualization to it. I do want to kind of loop back to one of the things you kind of brushed on initially, talking about finding the right person. And what do you look for in hiring a candidate? How do you screen for those? I think you weren't really talking about like a skill set earlier. You were talking about like how people approach the job. How do you find a person who is passionate about the work that they're doing when they may be less, certified or, less dressed out on the skills? How do you find that person that is more passionate and who may not be great today, but tomorrow they're going to be, part of the team?
Yeah. There's a couple of key things you kind of have to look at. Number one, I think every company has different things that make the company tick. So everybody's going to be a little bit different, I imagine. We're pretty high on our work ethic first. We like guys that don't mind chipping in and not putting on this like, this is the only hat I wear. In a small company, even at our size, that work ethic, that kind of saying, hey, I don't mind staying an extra hour or two to help out so that, we all get out of here a little bit earlier. We're built around that first. And then you get into, different things that I think every company should have. When I mentioned morals and just kind of the quality of who you are as a person being a really important thing that we look at, because that covers so many bases. When somebody really does have some empathy and the right morals and they're aligned with the, doing things the right way, it covers that they want to do the job the right way, that they don't want to cut corners. It covers that they want the right thing for the client, that they don't want to, they're not in there just to make a quick buck and get out. And it doesn't matter if they put in some, cheap adapter or something. All these things matter. And it helps when you build a team around that. It helps hold everybody accountable, because everybody one day might be in a position to say, hey, it'll work, it'll be fine, let's just move on. But then you got the whole team around you that says, no, that's not the way we operate. So if you kind of do that's a good place to start. But then you want to kind of judge on what their ceiling is going to be. Some people have high IQs, and in this industry, they can get into doing the programming and the setup. And then some people have better skills with their hands, and we have a lot of construction and that kind of stuff that we have to do. So there's, typically there's a lot of places. If somebody has the first two things I mentioned, there's a lot of places they can fit to really bring a lot to the table for for a company like what we do across the board.
Do you have, I do want to just touch on the employee thing one more time. Do you have that codified, like written down? Is that like those ethics, or those something that you guys practice and
Yeah, and that, unfortunately, that's, Stacy, my partner, she handles about half of this, and the HR side is her side 100%. And we have some amazing handbooks that we actually make our new employees go through and learn and read. And it really talks about, a lot of how we operate as a business and all of that. So, and then we review that. We do a monthly meeting that's got the whole team, and we kind of review, especially maybe not every meeting, but if we feel like things aren't going the right direction, we kind of go back to that handbook and kind of remind people what we're about and that kind of thing.
That's great.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of other things to cover, but this is such an important topic in the industry, and workforce development and recruiting and retention are so critical. So I want to go back and zoom in a little bit on, you talked about looking for those intangibles and the morality and good character and things like that. Can you share a little bit of what you've learned over the years? Get a little bit more tactical on that. What are some of the ways that you actually screen for that? For example, do you have favorite interview questions or interview techniques or places that you're going to source candidates? What are some of the methods that you've found effective in terms of attracting that right type of person with those intangibles to your company?
Sure. We've got myself. First of all, we have more than one person interview. It's not just walk in, do 20-minute interview and go out. We've got myself, Stacy, and then our general manager, kind of whether it's a general manager from California or Arizona. So they kind of go through 3 stages, and I think we all have different styles on how we interview, which is a really big positive. To speak to my personal style, interviewing is a lot like sales if you're a good salesperson, and a good salesperson wants to kind of get to the bottom of what makes somebody tick so that you can find the right, fit for them. So open-ended questions for me, anything that can just kind of get somebody rambling a little bit. It gives you the ability to kind of see into the way they tick, what they think, maybe what their hobbies are, what their, not necessarily, kind of family life or at least home life looks like. Obviously in our industry, sometimes we bring on some of the younger people that, early 20s, to train, and you kind of want to see, are they in party mode still, or are they people that are looking for their career, and just everybody will tell you the first time exactly what you want to hear. But if you kind of follow up with another open-ended question and then another open-ended question, you kind of get them to start talking, and eventually they'll feel comfortable enough with you, and you'll hear the guts of what they really are about.
Yeah. I've just in the last few years been involved on the interviewing side of interviews for the first time, and I would agree that those open-ended questions and really being tuned in, fully present, reading between the lines in those answers, and looking not just, of course, for the words that they're saying, but kind of the meaning behind it. It's not always obvious, but if you're really paying attention, I've found that it definitely helps you tune into some of those underlying themes and messages like you talked about. I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about, you've alluded to it a few times now, you own a couple of different businesses. So first of all, talk about your decision to buy a business as opposed to expanding your current one. What prompted you, first of all, to want to expand? And then again, elaborate on that decision of buying a business versus taking your existing brand and expanding that out into a new market.
Sure. There's a lot of factors into why you might want to expand. At some point, when I first started the company, I didn't have anybody that worked for me. And it really was, you really didn't think about other people as a business owner. You're kind of like, hey, how do I just make ends meet, and how do I make an income? And then once you start to get more and more employees, you start thinking a little bit differently. And there's a challenge, I think, especially more so now than there has been a lot, because there's so many corporate options out there, and they're growing. And, you look at Amazon and what they're doing for hiring and stuff like that. So you really do have to do something to show some growth and provide some opportunity for the guys that work for you. And if you're just trying to keep it at five, 5, 6 guys, that might be fine. Some companies are fine, and some some people like to stay with that size company. But we were kind of full of a lot of younger people that were constantly want to say, "Hey, what's the next step? What can we do better? How can we grow?" And I wanted to kind of encourage that, and so that's one of the bigger reasons for looking to expand, and how do we get to the next level. Kind of, it's what our team wanted to do, and it's served us well. It's been a lot of hard work, but I've got my general manager in Arizona. He started with us probably 6, 7 years ago. He had some six. He had six. Excuse me. He had six security experience, but he'd never had any experience in home technology or home automation. He'd never mounted a TV in his life. He'd never cut a speaker in before. And now he's the general manager of a company that, I mean, is pretty large in Arizona, doing a good amount of all of those things. So it's nice to see the growth from somebody that really didn't even know what this industry was about into somebody that can manage, a company in just a short amount of time. Um, so some of that is really about helping those guys, and everybody have some opportunity paths to grow with the company. The other thing is, I think I'm just kind of built that way, where I do want to look at what the next step's going to be. We did get pretty organized in Arizona. We got our act together, and it was like, okay, now what's next? And then looking at some of the shifts in our industry, there's kind of like a little bit of a lack of how big you want to grow, unless you're going to turn into a Vivint or some of these companies that are doing, more cookie cutter home automation systems and a little less custom. You kind of want to keep a small team and stay a little, personable with, each project. And so because of that, you got to look at different ways to grow. And the electrical side, adding that was a no brainer, because it gave us the ability to kind of take what we were doing and then just do more of it for the same client. And that we kind of had a saying, more revenue per client, and that makes a lot of sense. And then we're also more in charge of these things that we were already being held responsible for anyways. You're talking
Right.
lighting control, lighting design, all these different things that everybody calls us anyways. I don't know how many calls I've gotten personally at 11 o'clock at night because a smoke detector was going off that had nothing to do with our system whatsoever. Well, now it does have something to do with our system, at least. We installed the smoke detector, so,
Lots of people out there nodding their heads right now as they listen to this. So I want to drill in just a little bit more, and again talk about the decision to very specifically to buy a business, and sort of how you went about doing that. And then a two-part question here. Again, the decision to buy, and walk us through that process a little bit. And then you've alluded to this idea a couple of times it just sort of resonating with me, almost as an idea of like ratcheting up, right? You alluded to how in Arizona, it's like and earlier when you were talking about growth in general, you kind of hit these stages where you get to a certain place, then you're good for a while, then you got to get your act together again as you continue to grow, and you're almost ratcheting up as you go. So again, talk about the decision to buy an existing business, and then what are some of the core sort of systems and lessons that you've learned from growing and scaling one business that you're now able to apply as you go in and try to start getting traction and getting success in a second location.
sure. Yeah, it's there's lots of challenges with everything you just mentioned. Um, there does seem to be kind of a sweet spot you want to get to, and I just felt in Arizona there was really, I didn't want to become a 60, 70 employee business out there. You don't see really any of those in our industry, a handful of them. And so you kind of feel like, all right, I feel like I've got a good healthy business in this market, and I have friends in this. A lot of the people in this market are my friends, the competitors in this market. And I don't want to start really, business is business, but I don't really want to be going out there and purposely taking builders and contractors and stuff away from people that I share information. We try to learn from what we do. So I felt like we had a good, healthy business running, and we were in a good place. And besides adding electrical, it did make sense to say what other markets are out there that maybe I don't know about. And is it always sunny in these markets? Is there an ocean close by? That kind of thing. Um, so that's, one of the reasons we looked at maybe a different market. We have an absolute rock star office staff, purchasing, service. Our manager, our general manager out there has a handle on the business without me even setting foot in the door. And then our office manager, Jennifer, she's just, I mean, I don't know how she gets so much done in a day, but she's a rock star. So I kind of felt like, how do we take this and maybe get to the next step with it? So the business that we bought in California was a little bit of opportunity. I'd known Steve personally, and I knew he was getting close to wanting to retire. So it was kind of like right time, right place. We felt like we were in a good spot. He was looking to kind of keep the name and the business going, but not have to keep running all of that stuff. So it was just a good kind of fit for us. And so that's a big reason why we moved into California and took over. And on paper, it made a whole lot of sense because our admin staff did have a little bit of bandwidth to take on a little bit more. And now we have a whole nother location. And right now we're about half the revenue of our Scottsdale location, but that's a good bump to our bottom line of the two businesses. We'd kind of hoped originally to be able to turn them into one business, but California, they have some stuff that goes on differently business wise than Arizona. So right now we're still kind of keeping them as two separate entities that share some common staff and common, teams and purchasing power too.
Right.
So there's some purchasing power that comes along with that too. California had it was a much smaller company and focused on hi-fi, and I say California Audio Concepts focused on hi-fi and focused on a little bit more retail. So some of the different systems that we carry, they really weren't like preferred vendors or preferred dealers for those vendors. And once we came in, we were able to kind of work that to where we shot up and we're one of the more preferred dealers in those areas, which was nice.
So do you still have a retail location as well?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
We've got the same retail that Steve opened our shop up, the one we're in right now, in 1989. And if you go on and like Google Audio Concepts Long Beach, it's, you can see for some reason, Google will not take down the pictures from before I took over, but it's kind of cool now. You can see like what it looked like a year ago, which basically, nothing against Steve, still looked like it was opened up in 1989. And then we totally revamped it and, made it a more modern showroom with all the home technology, but we kept the hi-fi. He has a really, really nice hi-fi room. We do some things that a lot of people don't, Vandersteen and obviously Macintosh and stuff like that. So we kept all that, and we do have loyal clients that still come in and upgrade, and trade in their Vandersteen speakers and stuff like that. And we didn't want to get rid of that.
Right.
So we did that too.
Oh, very cool. So you kind of so bringing in electrical. You mentioned this before. I want to loop back to this. Bringing the electrical work in house. That is when I was an integrator, was kind of like a dream of mine to do, is to bring in electrical, because as you said, we're always responsible for the dimmers that go in the wall. We're supplying them usually, or we're specifying them, and someone else is supplying. But at the end of the day, when the light doesn't turn on, somehow it's your fault when they didn't wire it up.
Yep.
What was biggest challenge on bringing in what is absolutely a different trade? I mean, just it seems like it's the same, but it's a completely different mindset and trade. What was the biggest challenge bringing that in house into a low voltage company?
The first thing I would say is I would be probably just like a lot of AV guys who have said this. I will never say it again, but I've said, oh, it's electrical. It's a red, black, and white wire. How hard can it be? We've all made jokes about like, oh, it's hard. It really is. It's a different, like you just said, it's a different trade. There's a lot to it that I didn't know. And I'm glad we did it. There was about month 3 or 4 into it that I wish we hadn't. And it took getting over some pretty major humps to get to where I'm really happy that we pushed through it all. The first project we got, we, it was a big project. We did the lighting design for, which I felt really comfortable with. And then we ended up getting the electrical portion of that job. And it's 12,000 square foot home, with, I don't know, 9 different sub panels, solar, backup generator. The house, basically, the power dies, the house just keeps working. Nobody knows about it, the power going off. And all of these things, there was an engineer involved that just basically really wasn't paying attention to all of these things or asking the right questions. So, just like in AV, all these things got dumped on the electrical to figure out on site. And it was a lot of work. And, as I started, I didn't have all the right personnel to be able to take on that job. So 2 or 3 months into it, one of my very good friends in the industry was starting to get excited. We'd been talking. He's an electrician, and he was excited about what we were doing. And he decided to kind of close up his shop and come on board to Desert Valley and take over running it. And, if he wouldn't have, we wouldn't have probably made it through the first hump of getting over things.
Right.
So my advice to anybody that decides to go out and do that, just like with AV, it's about having the right people. And if you've done AV for 20 years, you have not done electrical, and you can't replace that experience. So having somebody on your team that really does have that experience, that works well with your AV team, that sees the big picture, is kind of key. I think, into trying to add that to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about the idea of, we've all sort of heard the saying, one throat to choke. And we've talked a little bit about that idea from the business perspective of, hey, I'm going to be receiving the phone calls anyways, so I might as well own it and get paid for the work that goes into it. Talk a little bit about the importance of one throat to choke from the client's perspective. You obviously operate in a luxury market, and how has bringing the electrical work in-house served you as a sort of a competitive differentiator in a crowded market?
Yeah. I'm just going to use the project we just wrapped up, which was a huge tunable lighting project where every light in the entire home, it was 10,000 square foot plus home, every light in the entire home was tunable, meaning the color temperature changed throughout the day to help keep your body in sync with the circadian rhythm. We had to accommodate this project. We had to go with 2 different manufacturers for tunable lighting. So there was not one standard system. Obviously there's a control system that's on top of it that to an end user, all they know is they hit a button and the lights turn on. But there's so much going on between the electrical, the low voltage lighting, to make all this work, that I've done home technology for a long time. I don't see a scenario where a company that doesn't do all of this in-house would successfully pull off that level of a project with partnering with an electrician, especially unless that electrician has a lot of experience and possibly a home technology guy on their staff as well. I mean, there's just too much overlap every day. My lead project manager on the AV side and my general manager for the electrical division, I mean, every day those guys were hands-on, talking through things. How are we going to integrate this? What part of it are you going to do? What part of it are we going to do? And it really did flow. At the end of the day, the guys liked each other more than before we started, which says a lot. And it turned out to be a good end result for the client because it worked. It turned into a system that was designed well. It worked. They're in the home. It's all functioning. I think going forward, the more of that kind of thing we can do, where we're designing the lighting design, then we're doing the electrical, we're doing the AV, we're doing the technology. It's just one point of contact for a client, one point of contact for the builder. No finger pointing. There were definitely things along this project that, we said, oh, that's not going to work the way we had planned. But we worked it out, and the client never heard about it because it was both of us. There was not, hey, they said they were going to do it this way, and we said we're going to do it this way. And there was none of this like, all right, let's get a mediator in here and figure this out. we had it figured out before we even, most things they never even knew we had to work, a little bug out or something on. So.
Turf battles can just be so frustrating. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to fix whatever problem was there. So why cause a problem along the way just so you can say that you didn't have anything to do with it? I don't know.
I agree.
It was so great to work with guys, electricians. I've worked with some larger projects, and it was so great to have them proactively come up to you and say, hey, this thing you think about you think you're going to do, it's probably not going to work. Let's go over there and take a look at it. And I mean, those guys saved me so many times, and in turn I saved them too.
Yep.
If I saw one of their wires running, where it shouldn't have been, I'd point something out. So it's just a better working relationship overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're definitely seeing that.
Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
I was just saying we're definitely, seeing that. It's, sometimes you kind of look at something, you say, this is why we're going to do this, and then it doesn't pan out. But I would tell you that communication between the home technology side and the electrical side, assuming your company has the right team players, it really is a difference maker.
Yeah. I can definitely see that, having a lot of experience in my past of working, especially on those bigger, more complex projects. There is absolutely no way that you're going to get the same effect working across two different companies that you are when you have people from the same company who can literally come in the office every morning and sit down at the conference table over a cup of coffee and really just hash things out day after day on those complex projects. The communication flow is just, it's everything when you get to that level of complexity. So that makes a lot of sense. And I love the idea, to go back to how you framed it earlier, of looking for growth, not necessarily by going out there and, banging your head against a wall in the market, trying to get more and more and more clients, but rather looking at clients and trying to expand the wallet share that you're getting from each individual one of those clients. And it seems like if you can get through that initial hump, you talked about those challenges initially, and if you can push through that, it sounds like it's a really great way to grow a business. So we are bumping up against our time. And speaking of growing a business, I'd love to ask you one or maybe two more questions about that growth, and talk a little bit about you personally and getting out of owner-operator mode. There's a lot of small and medium-sized businesses and business owners in this industry, and I know many of them who I've gotten to know over the years and worked with are really trying to think about the future and how do I get to that proverbial place of working less in my business and more on my business. What high-level advice would you give to anybody out there who's grappling with that challenge?
Oh, well, I was fully out of owner operator mode at the end of 2018. I took 3 months off, completely off the grid, before we bought our company in California, just to make sure our company was really operating at a level without me. And that was nice. Sometimes you think back and you say, why did I go back from that? And then I bought the California company, and we're, started with 6 people, and it was like starting all over. So I'm kind of going through all those steps that I saw in Arizona to try to get yourself where you're not in the middle of every decision again, a little bit in California. Mainly because California, we're still developing a few system designers and salespeople. So I'm kind of back into that role right now in California. The best advice, just because I've watched friends, in the industries or just other companies, and I've watched myself do it, and I still do it sometimes, is you can't do everything. Nobody's going to do anything the way you would do it. Sometimes they may do it better and you might be surprised. Sometimes they may only do something at 80% of the level of what you would have done it at. But you got to be willing to take all that, because at the end of the day, there's only so much time you can put into any task. And so you've got to let your team, you got to trust them, you got to teach them the way you'd like the end result to look at minimal. You don't necessarily have to teach them all the steps, because everybody works in different ways. And if you have really good people on your team, they're going to figure things out. But just kind of let people make a few mistakes here and there. Let your team learn from those. Just guide them. But don't set your expectations for anybody to be doing things the way you do it, or at the level you would, or even, unfortunately, sometimes with the care you would. We as owners, we go home and we think about this business till we go to sleep and then have a dream about it. If your employees are doing that, then you're not running a very good company. It's not a healthy company for your employees to work at, and that's something I've been working at. I have a general manager that's, basically in Arizona that, does the role of an owner. And I'm really trying to keep an eye on what he's doing because he does take a lot home with him. And I'm saying we've got to figure out ways to make sure you're disconnecting, so kind of watch your guys, watch how much effort they're putting in, acknowledge it, and be grateful for everything they're doing, because all these guys are putting in work for, your company and to build your name a lot of times. So, that's a pretty rewarding thing when you see a lot of people out there that are willing to do that for you as an owner.
Yep, absolutely. Great advice. Well, Justin, as Jason said, we're running up on our time, and do want to say thank you for your time, for joining us here on the show and kind of talking some business shop a little bit here. It's a fun conversation that we had. If anybody wanted to reach out to you and say hi, what's the best way they could do that?
Email's best. I have two emails, Justin at audioconceptsinc.com, which is California, and Justin at desertvalley.av.com, which is Arizona. So, I'm pretty responsive if somebody has questions, especially if you have any listeners that are kind of in a similar place and they want to just talk about, what their growth looks like, or have questions on what we did, or, I'm probably learned something from them, just as well. So.
Awesome. Well, Justin, I'll echo what Seth said. This was a really fun conversation. We appreciate you coming on the show. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
So it's a great conversation with Justin over at Audio Concepts and Desert Valley. Jason, like I said during the interview, picking up electrical was always a dream of mine, because I could always like think of all the things that I wouldn't have to do. But as he pointed out, it's probably more things that I'm not thinking, about, that I have to do, like riser diagrams and all this fun stuff that just I never had to think about before. But if I was an electrician, I would. But also, like, it would be nice to just not have to worry about that aspect of the project, though. Like,
yeah,
I'm thinking the next big thing he should do is maybe like purchase a cable company or something. That seems to be the next problem child in the list.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I think it's great. I think that it's one of those things, definitely pros and cons, not a panacea, but if you can get over the hump like he talked about and bring that in-house, then yeah, it's going to probably prevent a lot of headaches, and even of the headaches that you still end up having to deal with, at least you're getting paid for it.
Right. That's a good point.
So that's an important point to think about. But yeah, just generally really, really enjoyed Justin. Very clearly very thoughtful, comes across very humble guy, but successful. And I think that we can all, no matter what line of the home technology business that you're in, or any business for that matter, I think there were some good nuggets in there that we can all learn from.
Well, Jason, pick of the week this week. I think that you're my pick of the week this week. This is a story by you.
What an honor. This is indeed. This is going back. See what you got here. This is going back a couple of months. This one was up in residential systems, but evergreen.
Time flies right now. This is 2020, baby.
It does.
I can do whatever I want.
It does. No, this one is a piece I did for residential systems on productivity, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I've gotten a fair amount of feedback, people reaching out still, coming across this piece, and fun one to put together. Just kind of jumped into 3 different tools. I've been, as I've alluded to on the show, Seth, moved into a different role at One Vision back in the spring. And as a result, the general nature and sort of tenor of my day-to-day work has changed significantly. And this has, of course, happened to me, as it does to all of us, several times over my career. And every time I go through one of these major transitions, it becomes a catalyst for taking a fresh look at the tools that I'm using and how I'm sort of structuring my work and trying to keep a grip on things. So this was a opportunity for me to sit down and gather my own thoughts as well, and just talk about some of the tools that I've really adopted. I've continued down the road with Notion. Talked about that several months ago on the show, as I had just started to get into that, and I'm almost not using Trello at all these days, which is crazy. Gasp, exactly. Do use it for this show and a couple other personal things, but I've generally moved over to Notion. So I talk a little bit about that, and then another app that I've really started to embrace more, which is Todoist. I think Notion does a lot of things really well. One of the things it doesn't do particularly well, in my opinion, is function as just a reminder system and sort of what I call micro tasks. Like if I just need a place to park a little thing that needs to be done, and it's not necessarily a big project that I want to track a whole bunch of information on, but just smaller things that I need to remember. Todoist has really become my go-to for that.
What separates this from something like maybe OmniFocus, or I don't know if you try things like this one?
It's right there in the same
vein
genre.
Yeah.
I would say not much, probably. So all a matter of preference. I gravitated toward Todoist for some reason years ago, and I had the free version forever sitting on my phone. And I just upgraded to premium to try it out and kind of never looked back. So I think any of those apps like Todoist or Things, just having some app like that in your arsenal, so to speak, for, again, managing, to me, I mean, there's much more you could do with Todoist than I'm using it for. I use it very lightly, but ultimately just something to have little quick, small tasks and reminders.
Right.
I really like it.
Huh, cool.
And then the very underrated, underappreciated art of managing a calendar. Get into that as well. Totally not sexy, not a fun topic to think about, but I'm really just a big believer in sort of time blocking and keeping a grip on your calendar. To me, has been a big one. So
many have tried and many have failed,
including me. Often.
I don't think there's a good way to do calendars. I really don't. Like, there's no one way, obviously. There's no one right way. But calendars are just, I don't know. They just don't seem to work for me. They've never worked for me, I guess I should say. But I don't know. Like you have, it's kind of like Trello, right? Like a calendar is kind of just like a generic space, and you can put something at a specific time or on a day. Hey, look, I made your calendar in this picture.
Did you? You got the HomeTech podcast in there?
I did.
There you go.
Yeah. Seth off is one of
funny
the days I was out. Yeah. But like, that's an example. Like it's an all day event in a calendar. And like, you have to wedge that reminder into that all day event. And I don't know, something about that kind of thing, those little hacks you have to do, the color codes and everything, just doesn't work in my mind. I still haven't, I say that still not having found a good way to use a calendar, although I have been using it a little bit better recently. So calendars,
I think it really depends, right? Like I didn't use a calendar at all until a few years ago. I mean, I shouldn't say at all. I used one lightly, but I certainly wasn't a mainstay in my productivity stack until a few years ago. And it's just, that's when the nature of my work changed.
Right.
And I'm in tons of meetings now, and I have my work has shifted much more over the years from being kind of I guess a production resource, like actually building things, to more being kind of leading teams and managing teams that are building things. And so I'm in a lot of meetings and just have to really keep tabs on where I'm supposed to be and when. So for me, I'm almost forced into using a calendar. And as such, I've really adopted it for time blocking and making sure that if I need a couple hours on a Tuesday to focus on a big project, I need to protect that time. Otherwise, it will get booked.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
So, Robert in the chat room, calendars work best for actual physical events like client meetings that must truly happen at a specific time. Totally agree with that. I'm generally not a fan at all of using a calendar as a reminder system, although I will admit I break that rule occasionally if I've got a very time-sensitive thing, like, hey, I need to check in on this particular thing because it's going to launch that day. And so I really need to make sure I check in on Tuesday morning and that we're all good, ready to go. Like, I'll put that at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning because it really, truly is time-sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
But I generally try to avoid using the calendar as as a reminder system.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have the shared calendar in my family, and I don't know if you have a family shared calendar as well, but other people may not agree with the way that you run your calendar. So it's like their events will start polluting your calendar, and then all of a sudden you have things popping up like you have to do, and they're not there for you to do. You should be somewhere, but you're not. And yeah, that's what generally happens to me.
Sounds like there's some history behind this story.
That's why I just don't believe in like something needs to exist in the calendar space that works like the calendar does, but is in a calendar, I guess. I don't know. Something is missing here. Maybe because I can't convince my wife to use Todoist. That's just not going to happen. So I need a calendar, Apple, that does reminders essentially, and I think we'll be all right.
Well, if you ever figure out that family calendar thing, let me know.
Yeah.
Doesn't work here either, if it makes you feel any better.
I've got 3 events for this podcast, by the way. So just letting you know, 3 events for the one podcast.
Got to groom that calendar, Seth.
They're not all mine.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Well, if you have any feedback, questions, comments, picks of the week, calendar tips for Seth, ideas for a show topic or guest, give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you. Our email address is feedback@HomeTech.fm. Again, that is feedback@HomeTech.fm.
And we want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support the show through our Patreon page. If you don't know about our Patreon page, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support to learn how you can support HomeTech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month gets you a big shout out on the show, but every pledge gets you an invite to our private Slack chat, The Hub, where you and every other supporter of the show can gather every day for the inside baseball conversations about what's going on in home technology.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for other ways to support the show, we'd really appreciate a positive review on iTunes or in your podcast app of choice. Those reviews definitely help more people find the show. So if you enjoy what we do here on Home Tech, please take a minute to go do that.
Oh man, October 13th. It's like, it should be a Friday, it feels like, because it's just going to be so much going on.
Seth, go mark it on your calendar.
It's already on my calendar, Jason. Now I have 3 events.
Good. There you go. That's progress.
It's progress. Yeah. I guess so. I don't know. I'll have the Apple event, and if that gets too boring, then I have to stop watching it. I'll swing over to the Snap AV and watch that too, because I think that's going to be entertaining. We know that Snap AV and Control 4 did not really show up or do very much for CEDIA, so they kept their powder dry, as you say, and we'll be doing their big announcements there on their, what's new in each platform. So we'll be interested to see what they come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely looking forward to that. All right, Seth. Well, have a great weekend.
You too, Jason. Thanks everybody for popping in and chatting with us tonight, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care, Seth.